a couple of those in the following two passages. And then his summary passage is the very last quotation on page 4. Such are the opposing arguments of dogmatic philosophers to prove that gods do exist and to prove that such a thing does not exist. In consequence, the suspension of judgment of the skeptic is introduced, especially, let me add to these arguments, the inconsistencies that arise in everyday life about gods. For different people have different inconsistent suppositions about these matters, so that because of this conflict, neither are all of them trustworthy, because they disagree with one another, you can't believe them all, nor are some, because of their equal force. So you're led to suspend judgment. Well, I'll stop there. Thank you. And we can talk some more if you've got questions or comments. Yes?
The question about, in a way, why the Greeks didn't get into experimental science, or maybe they did to a certain extent, but I noticed like you had the atomists and you had skeptics who seem to have got at least the proto-science. They're looking for explanations in the natural world, or at least almost by allegory it seems like they're taking things out of nature. But is there evidence of people like looking at nature for explanations of why things were? I know that there's planetary motions that seem to have got down pretty well, but basically just comments on
right. So there was a certain amount of systematic observation, and I think probably the first examples of it were in the medical tradition, in the Hippocratic tradition, with recording of case histories, and some generalizations from the history with cases and what happened after you used a certain treatment. And indeed, the word empiricus in the name Sextus Empiricus refers to the empiricist school of medicine, which didn't postulate any kind of theory about what really was going on, but worked from observation and extended it to parallel cases. And in the period after Aristotle, you get the development of special sciences. And Aristotle himself was a biologist, and he actually, observed species and did dissections and that kind of thing. So there was also dissection in the medical tradition. But there wasn't experimentation. Experimentation is something that took an awful long time for human beings to think about doing in a systematic way. Really, the whole, although there's sort of independent thinking, the idea of designing experiments and carrying them out, kind of manipulating the conditions and doing something and then seeing what happens, I don't think occurred to anybody for 2,000 years. That's amazing, because we think, do an experiment, but that's a real huge jump to think about doing a kind of thing like that, apparently. Yes?
Would it be safe to not assume that Hero must have done some experiments?
Who?
Hero of Alexandria.
And Archimedes, and so there were a few.
Okay, you're asking about things that I don't know as much as I should.
Hero invented a very primitive steam turbine.
Okay, so he was making things. There was certainly...
He must have had some experiments along the way.
So he must have tried things out to see if they worked. Right. Yeah, that sort of thing certainly must have gone on. Now, what's the experiment of Archimedes that you're thinking about?
With a spiral to get water and mirrors to burn ships, and lots of experiments.
Okay, so I'm wrong. I'll have to look that up. I stand corrected.
Regarding the dream explanation, what do you think about this thesis that when human consciousness appears and then, you are kind of like schizophrenic, because, you know, being an animal and not having a consciousness before, you hear these voices, this inner voice, and then you think that it comes from God. And then there's another explanation where actually that goes along the law line, where it's not the strong and intelligent guy, but the intelligent, I think it's Strabon who says that the intelligent guy goes up to the strong guy and says, okay, make me the high priest, I will make you the king by by the will of God, because once your subjects expand to more than 300, then it's very difficult to impose your will through baseball bats. So you have to have a more persuasive kind of approach. So basically, you know, it's not the strong and intelligent, but the intelligent, the high priest, walking up to the strong, to the Charlemagne, right, of the day, and then inventing this, you know, God by Dei Gratia kind of approach.
Well, the Strabo explanation is plausible, but of course one wants a bit of evidence to see whether that's actually what happened. You can certainly see how, if you could convince the population that there was some god who had given this ruler the authority, that this would, you know, who had even more power than the ruler, that this would kind of consolidate the ruler's power, and this would be an attractive idea for the ruler. Remind me of the first point you made.
Well, the first one was that usually, I think it was by a guy in the 70s who wrote his book about the bicameral
Oh,
mind.
Julian James, The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of Bicameral
gods
Mind.
appear when you know, 50,000 BC, when the first
that's a fascinating book. I read it. I think in the end, he tries to explain everything